Welcome to the Living to 100 Club podcast. Here's our host, Dr. Joseph Casciani.
Welcome to the Living to 100 Club, where we explore what it really means to live longer and better. I'm Dr. Joe Casciani, a geropsychologist focused on the mindset, habits, and science of aging well. Each episode brings you practical ideas and conversations to help you stay engaged, resilient, and purposeful at any age. On today's program, I speak with Dr. Angela Peterson, a nurse practitioner and author of The Wellness Glitch, about the gaps in today's healthcare system and what individuals, especially older adults, can do to take greater control of their health. Dr. Peterson shares her perspective on how traditional healthcare often focuses on managing symptoms rather than promoting long-term wellness. Drawing from her clinical experience, she introduces the idea of a wellness glitch: systemic patterns in medicine, pharmaceuticals, and lifestyle that can unintentionally work against optimal health. We explore practical ways to improve vitality and independence in later life, including the role of lifestyle changes, hormone evaluation, and emerging regenerative approaches to pain management. First, a little background. Angela Peterson is a board-certified family nurse practitioner with a doctorate in nursing practice. As medical director, she oversees all clinical care at Amplified Regenerative Health and ensures every treatment plan is grounded in evidence-based medicine. Her approach combines clinical rigor with genuine compassion, treating the whole person and not just the injury. Angela, welcome to our program.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate you having me.
Great. Well, you're very welcome. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Tell me, what led you to write the wellness glitch? And what does that term mean in simple terms?
In simple terms, it really just evaluates the systems that affect our health and our lifestyle. I started noticing very similar patterns in a lot of my clients, a lot of similar complaints, symptoms, disease management. And it just, I kind of was scratching my head, why is this all happening? Why do so many people suffer from so many of the same things? And it really comes down to, the trust that we've had in the so-called experts for our healthcare. And a lot of people have just been kind of caught in the in the hamster wheel of
Mm.
healthcare, where it's disease management, it's not prevention. And you have a complaint, you go get a pill. You have another complaint, you go get another pill. And then, soon enough, you're on 5 or 6 different medications. You don't really know why. And we weren't really getting to the root cause of what is causing disease and people not to feel good.
Mm. So, as you talk about healthcare having glitches, what are some of the most prominent ones? What are some of the ones that jump out at us?
Well, like I said before, it's just getting kind of stuck in the trap.
Mm.
You trust, this person in a white coat that you've been seeing for many years, your primary care provider, and you trust what they have to say. You have high cholesterol, you get on a statin medication. But what really is the problem is your inflammation, and that, has never been addressed. You're not looking at your exercise, you're not looking at your sunlight,
Mm.
you're not looking at your nutrition status, your movement. So there's many things that go into health, but the healthcare system as a whole just is not, we're not taking care of the root cause issues. It's
Mm.
very much driven by profit. And that's what we have to really take a step back and ask the right questions. It's okay to ask questions. Well, why are you putting me on this? Isn't there something else I can do? And when we really look at, all of the precursors to a lot of these conditions, it's inflammation. And
Mm.
that's where our healthcare system gets wrong because we're not treating the underlying inflammation that's
Mm.
causing a lot of these chronic conditions.
Mm.
And then it's, a lot of it has to do with insurance and big pharma. And, it's just that, you know, it's that cycle that keeps repeating itself. And we're feeding into these large systems that don't really have our best interests at heart. It's very much profit driven. And that's where, as a consumer, you can take a minute to take a step back and really evaluate what it is you're doing and really make better informed choices. There's so much information available right now, really at our fingertips. And, people are using that and they're becoming more informed. And that's great because they start to ask the right questions. And when you start to ask the right questions, that's when you really reconsider this system that is glitching, that is not working for everybody. And, it's this profit machine that doesn't really have our best interest at heart.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're talking about symptom management, right? And we've heard the term sick care instead of health care. We focus on the presenting problem, but we don't look at the whole picture or what might have contributed to that. What are the lifestyles? Can we have prevented that? And that's lifestyle medicine, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that's you're practicing it. So, what should older adults be asking their providers that they're not asking them now? I mean, you mentioned why am I on this medicine, but what are some of the bigger questions that people should be
Well,
asking their provider?
I'm probably going to throw a lot at your listeners
Uh-huh.
that might be overwhelming, and I'll try to break it down into simple things that you can start asking. But what I see with a lot of seniors is their inflammatory state,
Mm,
and it's caused by the toxins in our environment, and it's caused a lot by the food that we eat, and it's caused by having really high blood sugar for a long period of time. And we see those numbers in the A1C. So that's a 3-month average of your blood sugar levels. And that's really such an important number for me. The other number that I really pay attention to is your CRP. That's your C reactive protein. And that
mm,
indicates your risk of cardiovascular disease. And that also is a marker of inflammation. So a lot of these chronic conditions that a lot of seniors have, starting with hypertension, hyperlipidemia, which is high cholesterol, diabetes, these are all preventative conditions that can really be reduced by keeping your blood sugar low. And, asking the question is like, well, why do I have, what else can I do to get off these medications, reduce
mm,
my inflammation, and start, you know, really reprogramming your body to heal itself and get off this polypharmacy.
mm.
Most seniors that I treat are on so many medications. I really try to, my job, I feel like, is to de-prescribe
Mm.
and really take away what's not needed because we're seeing so many really adverse effects of a lot of these medications that could be reversed by reversing your inflammation.
Yeah. Yeah,
And the
that's
one might, oh, I'm sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead, please.
I mean, this may be controversial, or you may not, you might think I'm kind of contradicting myself, but one of the things that I do to reverse inflammation, besides trying to readjust lifestyle, eating habits, so on and so forth, is to use these GLP-1 medications that
Mm,
are not necessarily medications. They're actually peptides that we
mm.
naturally produce in our body. We just don't have enough of them. But this is really the biggest advancement in medical
Yeah,
science that I've seen really in a very, very long time. And they're great tools to help reduce inflammation.
yeah,
And you know, when these are used appropriately under medical supervision, the numbers that I see coming down in a lot of clients, especially seniors, are dramatic and they're shocked. And it's a way to get off of prescription
mm,
medication. Now I know that we're adding in something, but what we're adding in is, something that's going to decrease
yeah,
inflammation.
yeah.
And when you decrease inflammation, that's how you increase your longevity and that's how you prevent chronic disease.
Mm. So it's as I heard a physician on my program before, he said, he was talking about taking more responsibility for our own health care. And I asked him about the GLP meds, and he said, "Look, if it helps." If it helps people get started, to take more ownership, to take more responsibility, to see some progress, he's all for it. And I think that's what you're saying too. It really helps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
definitely a Kickstarter, and it's, the studies that are coming out with these are all positive. And, the longevity benefits of it, the cancer reduction, the reduction in inflammation. And like I said before, that reduces your all-cause mortality. Your cardiovascular risk goes significantly down. So
Mm,
I just think all of the benefits definitely outweigh any of the risks, which are very minimal. And
mm,
quite frankly, like over, it's kind of a,
yeah.
it's been sensationalized,
Yeah.
but used appropriately, they can be very beneficial.
Yeah. So I think what I'm inferring as you're talking about what to ask our providers, what to ask our physicians, it really gets to the heart of this because you're saying, what can I do? What should I be doing to get off this medication, to get off these statins or whatever the meds are, the high blood pressure med? What else should I be doing? And that's what you're talking about. That's more of
Hmm.
the preventive approach. Instead of just focusing on what are the reactions to the pill, what can I do to decrease the types of meds that I'm on? I mean, that's the heart
Yeah,
of this approach. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know when we spoke earlier, you also mentioned that hormones are really being overlooked in older adults. How should people think about this area?
This is a huge area
Yeah.
of concern for me, especially for, seniors and women and men over, 60. In the early 2000s, there was a study that was published. It was called the Women's Health Initiative, and it was a study that looked at the use of hormone replacement in women. And the results were very alarming. And they were very concerning, and they, indicated that using hormone replacement was going to cause cancer, was going to cause cardiovascular disease, heart
Mm,
attack, stroke, so on and so forth. And many providers and stopped prescribing because there was this new black box warning that was telling everybody that this is not a
mm,
great thing to do. It's gonna kill you, and that scared women that are now entering, 60, they're 60 and 70-year old now. But the problem was it was a flawed study, and it wasn't looking at the right use of hormone replacement. They were using synthetic hormones. Now we use bioidentical hormones,
mm,
which are completely different. And it's left out this group of people that are now entering, the later stages of their life, and they're missing a lot of these building blocks that are essential for cellular function. So there's a hormone receptor literally on every cell of our body.
mm,
And ignoring hormone replacement is like ignoring the light in an old car, like
mm,
check your engine light in your old car. Just because it's
mm,
old doesn't mean, you still need to have these building blocks. You still need to check the engine. So using hormone replacement will prevent all cause mortality. And it really, the biggest thing is it prevents cognitive decline. It prevents
mm,
dementia. It prevents Alzheimer's.
mm.
And to me, that's just a non-negotiable,
Sure.
and it's never too late to start. A lot of older providers will, oh, you don't need that anymore. You're beyond those years. You're fine. You don't need it. Well, it's not true. Like we're living longer,
Hmm.
much longer lives than we ever have. And using these building blocks are really essential for overall function, and especially for cognitive function in men and women. And that to me is the most important, because we can live to 100. We've
Hmm.
seen this, and you're very knowledgeable on all of this. But if we're not at our best capacity mentally, then that's a problem, because you're not living to your fullest potential, and you're
Sure.
not enjoying these years as well as you should be.
Mm. Yeah. What comes to mind? What are the top one or two hormones that you think of with your clients, your patients?
Well, for men and women, it's different.
Mm,
But for women, they need a balance of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone.
mm,
And then for men, they really need to replace testosterone. And the ratios are different for men and women.
mhm,
But most men that I see, even really teenagers now, and this is the scary part, have very low levels of
mm,
testosterone. And it's an epidemic that we're not really talking much about, in just health wise,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of reasons for it, and a lot of it just has to do with our environment. But I see low testosterone across the board, and especially in my older clients.
Yeah.
And then replacing it is just it's game changer for people. And like I said, there's no, you're never too old,
Hmm.
to get it started.
To
So
benefit from it. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned there's a lot of information out there now, evidence-based studies, a lot of information for the consumer. How can people access this? Where do we go? What would you advise my listeners to do to access, be more confident when they're making these decisions? What do you think they can do?
I mean, AI has been a great tool.
Mm,
When used appropriately, you can add, AI can give you a lot of answers and cite actual research, that you can look at and
mhm,
refer to about these studies, about the evidence of, cholesterol is,
mm,
needed for brain function. Like there's a ton of studies right now that, are proving that is true. So, I think AI is great.
mhm.
I think
I do
that's a,
too.
a tool to use to ask the right questions,
Mhm.
like show me some studies on why, I need cholesterol for brain activity.
Yeah,
Well, you'll
yeah,
get, more than you've ever wanted,
yeah,
but that resource exists to provide, the right information.
yeah, yeah. So to go to any AI agent, as they call now, and knowing how to ask the question, show me the latest evidence on hormone replacement therapy for my age group. Can you summarize the top five studies? And AI can do that in,
Yeah.
less than a minute, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's some
And
good.
I think it's incredibly
Yeah,
helpful, and
yeah,
it gives you the information to make, better decisions. And I think that empowers people in a really, meaningful way because you're being educated. The information's always been there. It just hasn't necessarily been accessible.
that's right.
And, you know, seniors obviously have, a harder time with some technology than the
Mhm.
younger generations, but this is all very easy, and they're getting very good at it, which I think it's
Yeah,
great because
yeah.
they're empowering themselves with really, good information that they need for their health.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's great information too. And, it accesses databases around the world. And there's a lot of
Hmm.
research being done, not just in the US, but all over.
All
And
over the world. Yeah.
AI can tap into that and summarize it in seconds. I've
Yeah.
seen it.
No, it's amazing. I mean, it
I
really is,
yeah,
there's obviously a lot of,
yeah,
you know, um, things that aren't great about it,
yeah,
but for the most part, just gathering information, I think
yeah.
that's been like a really huge breakthrough for
Yeah.
people.
What about when people get conflicting advice? I mean, one group suggests A and another group says not A, it's B. Where do we go for that? Or what do you think we can turn to?
Well, that's the hard question because there's
Yeah,
always going to be conflicting
yeah,
information no matter what. One group's going to say this, one group's going to say that. And then I think you just have to really look at yourself and what you believe in and where your core values are. And if you believe that medications are going to help you, well, you're probably not going to, not
mm,
going to change your mind. But if you believe that, the right diet, the right amount of sunlight exposure, the right amount of movement, and, the way to keep your blood sugar regulated, if that resonates with you, then you should probably, start
mm,
making some of those changes. But
mm.
we're just, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't necessarily always make them drink. We're
Yeah,
still kind of in that phase of life. But and that's just human nature.
yeah,
There's not much we can do about that, but except present information in an easily digestible way. And if
yeah.
it doesn't resonate with you, then you can make your own
Mm,
decisions.
sure. That's right. And it's more informed decisions. That's what I call it. We can get a lot of education, but it helps us to make those really informed decisions. And that's what counts, not just you know, um, what you hear on a TV ad or something like that. We can really educate ourselves about
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't
whatever.
want to say like all medications are bad. Like that's
Yeah,
not what I'm trying to say. Like
no,
there are
no,
some things that are
of course.
great. There's actually a new classification of drugs called DORAs.
Mm.
They help with sleep. And there's actually some studies that have shown that it's reducing Alzheimer's.
Uh,
So there are some really good
mm,
medications that are out there, but for the most part, some of the ones that have been overprescribed are really causing more problems than they should
Yeah,
be.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's great information, Angela. I appreciate that. But I just want to take a break for a half a minute. And before we continue, if any of my listeners are working in senior living or care services, you know how important it is to create meaningful engagement, not just fill time. Many of the ideas we discuss here are built into structured programs I've developed for teams and communities. You can learn more at living to 100 solutions. That's living to 100 solutions. Yeah, thanks. Let's continue with Angela.
No
You,
worries.
yeah, you work with approaches like peptides and regenerative therapies. How should listeners think about these in practical ways?
Well, this is a very hot topic right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
and there's a lot of noise and a lot of news about peptides, and it's going to do this and that, and it's going to change really everything.
Mm,
And peptides are awesome. I really think they're the next wave in medicine. But what's important is what is first is the foundation. So, and these peptides can be very expensive too. So if your foundation is not solid, there's no reason to jump into the world of peptides
mm,
until you have, a really solid foundation, of good metabolic state,
mm,
you're at an ideal weight, and then you've really optimized your hormones. That's the foundation, and then we can start to add in things for optimization. And really, there's a peptide for everything. And then some of my favorite ones help with healing and repair, so getting
mm,
over injuries and be able to heal your body a
mm,
little bit more holistically.
mm,
So there's lots of possibilities. And you know there's really a peptide for everything, but the important thing is to start with the foundation. And if that is not solid, then none of it else really matters. Then I kind of
mm,
call it like,
mm.
pissing on a forest fire.
Yeah,
Like it's not going to do much. It's fancy and you may, have some placebo effects to it. But the real important part is to start with that healthy foundation and then
yeah,
work our way from
yeah.
there.
Yeah, that's a necessary baseline. And
Yeah.
once you're there, then you can look at. So can you give us an example or two of someone who benefited from this approach using
I
peptide?
mean, I have a ton. So
Yeah.
it's really a pattern with a lot of my clients
Mm,
that, I get a lot of consults that I do every day, and people will come in with a laundry list of things that they've, seen on Instagram or TikTok that they want to try. And part of my job is to, explain how this works, and then explain how
mm,
we need to really start with the foundation. So if you're not at a healthy weight, that's part
mm,
of, like I said, what we need to start with first. So I see this a lot with people, and they'll get maybe a little bit frustrated with me, but it's you know we need to make sure those building blocks are there. But this I see all the time with my clients.
mm,
I mean, just looking at the lab work for a lot of people that I evaluate, the before and afters are really remarkable, and I get so excited when we can start taking away you know medications, and they can
mm,
start having more agency over their health. But it's like it's a common theme with most of my clients. But the weight loss journeys that I've helped people really conquer has been like one of the absolute
mm,
highlights in my career,
mm,
because a lot of people have tried everything. They get very frustrated, and then when they get have a tool like a GLP-1 that helps them get to the you know ideal weight that they want to be at, they're really just ecstatic, and so
mm,
many things in their life just start to change. And I love seeing that. I love
mm,
helping people with that, and it's been like a true joy to
mm.
really
Yeah.
be part of that journey.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, people do struggle with weight loss, of course, and the GLP medication regime is very important. Are there any things that are also necessary to combine with those medications?
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. I
yeah,
mean, it's not, like I said, it's a tool.
yeah.
And you need to definitely make sure you're getting, enough protein that's a whole
Mm,
food source,
mm,
not a bar shake or a powder. Those are
mm,
synthetic. And really my crystal ball of predictions is going to be that the protein craze of you know, the of this time is
Hmm.
going to be refuted,
Mm.
because a lot of people are just overdoing it and not using whole food sources. And, the protein that we don't absorb is just stored as fat.
Mm.
And I think it's going to be very similar to the low fat craze of the 80s and 90s.
Mm.
So that's kind of my crystal ball
Yeah,
prediction.
yeah,
But
yeah, you're right.
you have to get, adequate. You have to get, good protein sources. And I really prefer that to be from lean, real foods like lean
Mm.
meats,
Mm.
eggs, cottage cheese,
Yeah.
cheeses even. So incorporating that into your diet is very
Mm.
important. Exercise is very important. It's very important to, do resistance training.
Mm.
And those are all things that, are definitely, needed when you're on a weight loss journey.
Sure. Yeah. Lifestyle factors that are important wherever we are, right? I mean, diet and
Hmm.
fitness and connection, social connection. So, how do you help patients move from the quick fix, the short-term fix, to long-term strategies? People want immediate results. How do you help people think more long-term?
Well, it's just like with anything, the first step of a, 100-mile race is the first step.
Yeah.
And, you just have to keep your goals in mind and really celebrate the small successes along the way. The
Mm.
first time, I just this last week, I had a client call me and say, you know what, I was able to get off my Lexapro. And I said, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I had actually helped her start making homemade yogurt and to
Mm.
really work on her gut lining. And because the gut brain axis is so
Mm.
connected. And that to me, I'm like, that's a huge win. That's a huge win for you. Congratulations. That's great. I'm here to help if you're having one of, those days. But just being able to celebrate the small successes along the way and just giving tons of encouragement. People get discouraged very easily.
Mm. Sure.
And, like, well, I didn't lose any weight this month. I'm like, but
Mm.
look at your blood pressure, look at, the activity that you've increased. Like,
Mhm.
so really being able to help people just celebrate those small wins
Yeah.
goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important. I agree. It's the small steps. They build up that confidence. You get small successes and it builds up more confidence. And we don't have to have a success every day, right? But we just want to think of what am I going to do tomorrow that I'm not doing today? And that's what you're talking about. Celebrate the small wins. That's
Hmm.
important. Instead of thinking about where I want to be 6 months from now, we think about where I want to be this week, what I want to
Yeah.
be doing differently this week.
And I always ask people too, like, how do you feel? Like, how is it you feel? Like,
Mm.
we've done all these things, we've made all these changes, and, they're like, actually, I feel amazing. I'm like, well, just remember that, remember how you used to feel, how you were sluggish, you were fatigued all the time. And, now you have energy, you're able to keep up with your grandkids, your
Mm.
kids, and do activities that you hadn't done in a long time. So, just being able to recognize how you used to feel
Yeah.
versus how you feel
Yeah.
now is really helpful too.
Yeah. That's always one of the best outcomes measures, right? How do you feel? How are you seeing yourself today rather than a month ago? Yeah, that's important. So when we spoke also, we touched on the loneliness epidemic. Do you see that coming into the picture with your clients? What's that like?
Yeah, absolutely. And I write about this in the Wellness Glitch too,
Mm.
that our society's just become so disconnected.
Mm.
And even though with social media and, you know, use our phones and stuff, we can stay connected with loved ones, but there's a disconnect with it too. And just having, people around and people in your life, whether it's neighbors or a senior center, is really, it's so important, especially as we age, because we're social creatures. That's how we thrive. And when you don't have that kind of a supportive network, we really see disease start to increase when
Mm.
people are isolated and they don't have that social connection. So
Yeah.
there is a lot of evidence to that. And just finding your community, getting involved, staying and having a purpose too,
Mm.
like that I think is so important as we age, to maintain some sort of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. Someone's counting on you. What is that purpose going to be for you? And really being able to stay connected to your community is really important. And it's easy to disconnect because we can get our food delivered, we can work out in our homes, we can really, you can live in New York City with millions of people and really never have to leave your apartment if you don't
Yeah.
want to. And that design is not sustainable for really human connection.
Mm. Mm.
And that's when people get depressed. And that's when another medication comes into play. So maintaining your environment and your connection with your community, which I know you talk a lot about that, I think is really a foundational building block for overall health.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I think that's so true because it is so easy to pull back, especially if we become disconnected from family. We kind of retreat and maybe isolate. And it's really a matter of pushing ourselves, kind of really setting that plan, even the small goal, like I need to do something today that I didn't do yesterday, because it doesn't come easy. It's hard. Sometimes those walls get put up and we do need to force ourselves. But then we see some of the benefits. Then we see some of the joy, some of
Yeah.
some of the rewards of reaching out. Maybe it's a phone call, maybe it's an email, maybe it's going to the senior center, maybe it's connecting with a neighbor, whatever it is. But it's those small steps that are so important. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. So if our listeners could do one or two things this week to improve their health, one or two steps they can take, what would you suggest?
Well, there's lots,
Yeah.
but it really starts with kind of evaluating where you're at and where you want to be. Um, and reducing your exposure to toxins is huge.
Mhm.
So avoiding seed oils and processed food, I think, is fundamentally important. And also really pay attention to the plastics that you consume. This is causing more problems than we're really aware of. But, not choosing to not drink out of a plastic water bottle, using filtered water in a metal container is much better.
Mhm.
Not microwaving, convenience meals in the microwave that, the plastic is leaching into the food. And the plastic exposure really is causing a lot of damage to hormones,
Mhm.
and also artificial scents. That's kind of a big one that I have with people. I don't think we realize how toxic that is to our environment.
Mhm.
There's studies, that are saying that like actually being around cigarette smoke is less toxic than, the fumes and the carcinogens that are coming out of artificial scents, and they're everywhere.
Mhm.
They're in people's cars, they're in their
Mhm.
homes, they're in their office, and
Yeah.
the ones that you plug into the wall,
Yeah. Yeah.
they're just all full of chemicals. And getting rid of that out of your home environment is really, really, really important.
I hadn't heard that. Like the oil diffusers that we have that.
As long as it's a natural,
Okay.
essential oil,
Uh-huh.
that is much, much better.
Mm.
But most of them are not.
Mm.
Most of them are chemicals. And, most of the candles you buy commercially have a lot of toxic chemicals and plastics in them.
Yeah.
Paraffin, is plastic. And looking at these like petroleum products that,
Mm.
make plastic, that is a huge environmental, exposure that needs to be eliminated. And, just doing those simple things can really change kind of your
Mm.
body's like reaction
Mm.
to, stress
Sure.
and how it functions. So, just pay attention to those little things
Yeah.
and, really try to remove those from your day-to-day life.
Day-to-day life. Yeah, that's great advice. That's great advice. So a lot of the plastics that we use, it breaks down in the microwave and it's in the plastic drinking bottles and now the oils and not the oils, but the scents and that we pick up to make our
Yeah,
house
and
smell
they've
pretty.
just been kind of like used, oh, we just really haven't thought about it. The research hasn't
Yeah.
been there. It's just
Yeah.
been a consumable that, I want my house to smell good, so I'm gonna put
Yeah.
these air
Mm.
fresheners everywhere. I don't want my car to stink, so I'm gonna,
Mm.
you know, put it in my
Mm.
car,
Yeah.
but the long-term effects that we're seeing with health are just starting to come to the surface,
Yeah.
and they're you know not the best.
Yeah. Well, that's some great advice. That great information you've shared with us. Thank you. Thank you, Angela. Tell us about your website and how people can get a copy of your book and learn more
Yeah,
about your work.
absolutely. My book's on Amazon.
Yeah.
It's in paperback or the e-Kindle version as
Mhm.
well. So it's called The Wellness Glitch. You can
Mhm.
just look it up there.
Mhm.
And, I go into a lot of these things in more detail and just, how they're all connected and how we fix it. So I kind of present the problem and then I present solutions on how we can fix things. And then my website is ampdhealth.net.
Mhm.
I'm also very active on Twitter, which I still like to call it.
Mhm.
And you can find me there at Fix the Glitch Now.
It's
And that's probably my favorite platform because I really enjoy writing. And I feel like it's a good way for me to express my
yeah.
thoughts, especially with writing. But I'm also on Instagram at Amplified Total Wellness as
Mhm.
well.
Okay.
And you can reach out and text me anytime. I answer questions and do consultations. And my phone number's on the website, but I monitor incoming text in real time and I'm happy to respond and give
Yeah.
advice and maybe set up an appointment for a consult.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great to be so accessible. Thank you. So the website ampdhealth.net,
Correct.
ampedhealth.net. Okay. Well, great information. Thank you so much for
Oh, thanks, Joe.
being
This
on
was
the
a
program.
pleasure.
Oh, you're most welcome. You're most welcome. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. As always, I encourage you to take one idea from today's conversation and see where it might fit into your life. Small shifts over time can lead to meaningful change. If you'd like more guidance and resources, you'll find them at my website, living200.club. Until next time, stay positive and keep on smiling.
That's right.
Okay, thanks.